Hello, Global FM.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone in the world.
Hans here.
And Jacob.
As your host tonight, we're going to be talking about the history of the 1940s.
Yeah, that's right. Specifically about the Japanese Americans that lived during the time.
And we are excited to introduce two special guests tonight, George Takei and his son, Junior.
Alright, let's give them a warm welcome.
For those of you who don't know, George Takei is most known for his role in Star Trek as Captain Sulu. He is also the author of the graphic novel They Called Us Enemy, which depicts his experiences during World War II.
And They Called Us Enemy tells us what happened to George and his family during the war, and it includes their deportation, the selling of their property to fund the camps they inhabited,
Ooh.
and the treatment they got after being freed.
Now let's dive into the past. George, can you start by telling us what it was like to live in the internment camps?
Yes, and I'd like to thank you for having me. About internment camps, my family and I were relocated to camps in Arkansas, especially Camp Rower. The conditions there were not that bad, but not good either. I wasn't aware of how serious at that time, however, since I was only a kid.
Must be incredibly hard. And moving on. So, how did your family cope with such a hard situation? One that feels like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
My parents were one of the strongest people in my life. They tried to make life as normal as possible for us brothers and sisters, even with the barbed wires and guard towers. And since he was the camp manager, we were luckier than most. It really didn't feel like we were suffocating in those camps.
Good. We're sorry for what you have experienced, George.
Thank you, but please don't worry about it.
Jacob, we moving on? Alright. You have become a supporter for civil rights and social justice. How did those influence your activism, fighting for marginalization?
It all started from the terrible condition we faced during the internment camps, and it forever changed my worldview. And consulting my father, who was far more aware, made me aware of the importance of civil rights for all people, since we Japanese Americans were deprived of such rights. Becoming an activist speaking out against discrimination is simply the right thing to do for me.
And George, you've also become a large figure in the entertainment industry. So how did becoming an actor help with your activism?
Acting has given me a platform to reach everyone. Through my role in Star Trek as Captain Sulu, I was given a chance to represent our representation as Asian Americans, and also using my popularity to increase the awareness about issues of discrimination.
That's great. Now, George Jr., how did your father influence your views and activism?
Growing up with my father, he instilled me the value that you shouldn't take things for granted. His experiences greatly influenced my views about those kinds of stuff. Even if I don't actively practice it like my dad does, he still greatly support the idea, since it is what brought me into this world, and many other people like me pretty much.
That's great too, having your father influence your views. So, George, speaking of the future, what are you planning to do next?
I still hope to continue talking about civil rights issues, but I think my age is catching up to me, and I think I've done my job enough already.
Is that so? If then, thank you, George and Jr., for sharing your stories and insights with us today. It's been an honor to have you both on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us and for the important work you do.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning into Global FM. Until next time, peace.